This podcast is being brought to you by SE Podcasts, a Kibbleworks enterprise.
So I'd like to introduce Larry Brendtro, who's here in Regina at the Ranchero Society 40th anniversary celebrations. And this morning he's been telling us about the Circle of Courage and this thing called RAP training. Larry, what can you tell us about RAP training?
RAP, R-A-P, is an acronym for Responsibility Pathways. Well, what's that? We believe that young people that work with young people often need some extra help in figuring out how they can connect with challenging kids, help these young people sort out problems in their lives, and restore the harmony and balance. And so RAP, or Responsibility Pathways, tries to help people that might be mentoring, teaching, guiding, caring for, parenting youth. It helps them to respond to the needs of youth rather than react to problems. And so often when young people do things that adults disapprove of, it's sort of the beginning of a process by which they become more and more alienated from one another rather than a way to connect. And our goal is to work with young people so that they can take pathways to responsibility. We, over a period usually of 3 days, we work on a few really important concepts. First of all, I think, is understanding that young people who are caught in cycles of conflict within themselves or with other people in their environment are literally operating out of pain. In the brain, we have pain-based and pleasure-based emotions. And we're created this way so that when we are experiencing situations that are not going to be good for our survival and well-being, we tag those experiences as painful. When we experience pleasurable experiences, those are kinds of events that we want to continue. So young people who are in pain have a way of acting that often causes adults in their lives to mirror that. In other words, a young person is disrespectful and has an angry tone of voice, and before long, the adult working with that young person matches that angry tone of voice. It's almost like reverse behavior modification. Young people are sometimes bringing out in us things that we don't expect. And so there are a lot of young people who are really pretty cautious about adults. A colleague of mine who is a professor of social work and youth development at Michigan State University, Dr. John Cita, was in fact just this kind of troubled, disrespectful kid. In fact, he got himself kicked out of 15 court placements by age 12. And as he sort of describes the world of young people like this, they become angry and adult wary. And while most ordinary situations, young people, children naturally connect to adults, we have quite a group of young people out there who almost naturally avoid adults, fight adults, get involved in different kinds of contests. So we know that everyone that's listening already has abilities to connect. If you're a teacher or parent or anything, you have these natural abilities. But we're really talking about how do you connect with kids who make that very hard, who really are almost pros at driving off the very adults that they might need to help set their life on a different pathway. And so first thing we want to do is to have adults see this behavior as pain-based behavior. One of our colleagues and former board members of our organization is Dr. James Anglin, who is a professor in British Columbia. And he did a study of 10 different Canadian programs for youth at risk. And he was surprised in his interviews that when talking to the youth who became comfortable and shared their experience, the word that came up more often than anything else was pain. Now, when talking to adults about the youth, that word virtually never came up unless someone would say this kid is a pain. And so when you're experiencing emotional disturbance in your life, when your needs aren't being met, our brains are designed in such a way to send painful emotions. That's a signal that this is not what we want, and hopefully we can correct this pattern. But you take, for example, what if we assumed that what most children and young people need most are strong, caring, consistent, nurturing adults, but that a particular kid has learned not to trust adults, and so approaches all other adults as if they were adversaries, as if they're the enemy. So the process by which these kids provoke adults, avoid adults, get in arguments with adults, is an example of a way of coping that obviously we want to change. Now, we need to kind of understand where the young person is coming from, even though understanding them doesn't mean excusing the behavior. But if we just sort of wildly go after their troubled behavior without having a clue, we'd be like a physician sort of beating on an arm, because it's not doing what we want. And so when we study this process, we ask this question: how could we develop a training program that would work in any culture for people working with any kinds of young people in any kind of setting? Because if we have to have totally different training for teachers and foster parents and counselors and mentors and youth workers in churches, if they all need some sort of different training, maybe that's not efficient. So the principle behind RAP, from a technical point of view, is to come up with what is called a universal design training. So when we teach RAP, we do it in such a way that any reasonable adult or even responsible peer mentor can understand, can get invested in the process. We have a large number of very short little video clips that run throughout the course, and a lot of other visuals, because if one looks at brain research, people were startled to discover that in our higher brain, our outer brain, 50% of all the brain cells are involved in vision. So let us not just use words as we're kind of required to do in this interview, but let's sort of paint pictures. Let's show what this would feel like. Now, when a little kid is in pain, if you could picture in your mind's eye a little child, they go straight from their pain emotions to their pain-based behavior. They cry. Well, then adults come and look at this cute little thing, and it tells your brain, even if you haven't had training, meet the needs of this kid, comfort this child, find out what it is that this child needs.
Incidentally, that bit of video you used this morning was priceless. Absolutely priceless.
Oh, yes. But if you somehow have a teenager whose hair is spiked and whose shoulder has chips on it, and is really has an attitude. My daughter said, "No, Dad, it's called tude." Well, in any case, it isn't a natural process to say, "Oh, my dear adolescent, where are you hurting? How can I help?" Not that, in fact, that approach would cause the young person to tell you to do anything except shove off. So, how do we then help what's going on, and then engage young people.
This podcast is being brought to you by SE Podcasts, a Kibbleworks enterprise.